Guys, welcome. So today I want to start the very first in what will be a series of sessions on Python basics for data analysts and data professionals. So I started my Python journey almost 2.5 years ago and I was completely lost. I started Python when I was in my 30s, quite a late time to start learning a new coding language. That's what you'd think, but that's not the case. And what you'll find is Python is actually a very easy language to master and a very easy language to learn compared to other languages out there. So in this first session, I want to help you guys get started with some basics. So we look at strings, we look at integers, we look at variables. So we look at some essential data types before moving on to more advanced sessions. If there's anything you particularly want me to cover, do drop it in the comment section and I'll definitely consider it for the next session. But one thing I will say before we start is that you essentially want to find a use case, so a project where you can start using Python straight away. And that's the best way to learn. And I'll come back to this in future. But the best way to learn Python is to have an example use case or an example project to begin with. So I'll give an example. You might need to do a VLOOKUP between two spreadsheets. Instead of doing it in Excel, doing a VLOOKUP in Excel, use Python. So it's a great opportunity to put into practice what you've learned. But without going into too much detail and specifics, I want to make sure you guys have got a good grounding in terms of the basics, and that's what we'll cover in this session and beyond. And one last thing to note, before we start, you will need some applications. So you'll need an IDE, which is short for Integrated Development Environment. And it's essentially an app that allows you to hold all your code together. And my recommendation and my tool of choice is Jupyter Notebook. So I'll put a link up here. If you're interested in downloading Jupyter Notebook, do check that out. If you've already got an IDE, then what are you waiting for? Let's begin. Right guys, first thing I want you guys to do is to start up a new instance of Jupyter Notebook. This will open up in your browser. So if you haven't already installed Jupyter Notebook, check out the link that I put up on the screen right now. Once you've got Jupyter Notebook, I want you to open up a new Python 3 instance, and that will bring you onto a tab that looks like this. So a really short overview of Jupyter Notebook already, if you're not familiar. Essentially, Jupyter Notebook works in cells. So every time you enter a line of code, it goes into a cell, and then you add a new cell, insert cell below, and then you can just keep adding lines and lines of cells as you move down your script, basically. So that's how Jupyter Notebook works. It works in a cell format, in a modular format, as it's more popularly known. So I'm just going to delete some of these cells really quick. And there's a few shortcuts you should know. So if you want to insert a new cell, we'll firstly click into the cell. You'll see it go green. If you press escape, it'll go blue. That means you've jumped out of the cell. Now, if you want to add a new cell below, you press B. If you want to add a new cell above, you press A. So that's how it works. So I'll give you an example. Let's do that again. So we start here, add a new cell, press B. We'll go back into start, press escape, so it goes blue, and press A, and we add a cell at the top. And to delete a cell, make sure you jump out of the cell so it goes blue, and press D twice, and that will delete your cell. And that's it. That's in a nutshell how Jupyter works. And then there's two types of blocks. You've got a coding block or you've got a markdown block. There's two more. We're not going to cover them. Code is essentially where you type in your code. So you could write, something like this, print and a print statement, hello world. But a markdown is quite different. It's essentially a text block where you're just adding comments. So if I change this cell into a markdown, I can now add a heading or a subheading if you like. So I can say this is just a description. Okay, and you can change the size of this by adding more hashtags. The more hashtags you add, the smaller the markdown or the header changes in size. And then if you want to run everything on screen, you go into cell and then run all. And that essentially will run everything for you. Okay, So guys, that's how it works. Let's just start off with a very first few simple essentials. So I'm just going to delete what I've got here and start from the top. So first thing I want to show you guys is what is known as a few data types, and the first of these is the integer data type. So an integer, to show you on screen, is a numerical value usually. So for instance, a number 5 can be an integer. A float, on the other hand, is a numerical value with a decimal point. So for instance, a float here would be 3.4. And then the third data type we want to cover is a string. So my name Sid would be a string. And then the last data type, not really a data type, but one you should know anyway. It's called a variable, and that could be anything really, but it's basically a name to something. So we're going to play with these four data types, and we'll create some examples. So firstly, I'm going to do A. I'm going to give A the value of 5. If I then escape and press B, or you can do cell insert below, I want to add another integer value as well. So to the letter B, I'm going to assign 2. And then I'm going to add another cell below. And then finally, what I want to do is a calculation. So I'm going to do A star B. That is, the star is an operator. So the star means multiplication. And then if you do 5 times 2, what do you think we're going to get? We're going to get 10, right? So if you now click cell, run all, you're going to get your 10. And that's how it works. So we've got 2 integer values. We've assigned them to two variables. So A is a variable here, B is a variable. And when we do the variable of A multiplied by B, we get 10. Okay? That's in a nutshell how it works. Now, you can change these variable values. So if I now add another cell below, and now I want to change the value of B. So let's now set the value of B to 3. So now if I run this, what do you think is going to happen? It's still 10. Now the reason why is because this line of code is still above the change of the value from 2 to 3. So essentially we need to type this out again and move it one cell below. So the way we do it is just cell, insert cell below, and we can now recalculate or respecify A times B. And now if we run all, you'll get your 15 at the bottom here. So that's how you can change variables. Anything that you subsequently dictate as you move down your blocks of code will become the new value for a given variable. So please keep that in mind. And then the other thing you need to remember is that you need to run all the previous lines of code in order for this one to change value. So I can run cell A, run cell, I can run cell B, run cell, and then I can run cell, this one here at the bottom, run cell, I'll get 10. The reason why is because I never ran cell number 16 that you see here. And that's because this is the change that goes from 2 to 3. So you need to run this. So if I now run this, I can now run this, I should get the 15. So cell, run cell, and there's my 15. So that in a nutshell is how integers work and how you can assign values, integer values to variables. Now let's just mix it up a bit. I'm just going to add another cell at the bottom here, insert below, and this time I'm going to create a new variable, and this one's going to be, let's just give it a value of 3.5. okay, so now what I'm going to do is add another cell below. I'm going to do A times C. So if you guys want to see the result of this, let's have a look. Let's do run all. Here's your value, 17.5. So now you can see I've used a float. The variable C is actually a float because it contains an integer. And if ever you're wanting to, check, if ever you're unsure what a certain variable is, you can use a function, which I'll show you now, called the type function. The type function essentially looks like this. You write out type, open bracket, close bracket, and inside you write the variable name. So here I'm going to write C, and then if you run this function, run cell, it'll tell you that it's a float. Okay, so if I change this to A, remember A is 5, this is just an integer. If I now run this, it'll tell me it's an int, or short for integer. So that in a nutshell is how you can check whether certain variables, or what data type certain variables are. And we can change these, where I've got A, B, C, it doesn't have to be A, B, C, it could be apples, and it could be, berries. And then you can now type in apples and berries. And although we've changed the name, it doesn't make a difference because Python doesn't care. Python only wants to know, what have you named the variable and have you typed the variable out correctly. So if I now run the first cell, the second cell, and now our third cell, we should still get 10. It doesn't make a difference to Python. Now, in terms of other variables, this is where we can start to mix it up. So we can let's add another cell below. So now I want to add a few different variables. I don't want to use, apples and berries no more. I want to type something which is a bit meaningful. So now I'm going to type in a new variable called first name. I'm going to assign this to my name, Sid. Now, in Python, you can call variables whatever you like, but whenever you have a space in between a variable name, you need to use something to kind of connect it up. So you've got a choice here. You can have first name like this, but it's hard to read, so you might do this, first name like this, or you might do first name like this. Entirely up to you, really, but the industry standard is to go like this. This is known as a snake case, where you've got the underscore, and this is known as a camel case. So just to show you the difference, snake case is what we'll use, but this is how the different cases look. So a camel case usually looks like this, where you've got an uppercase for the second uppercase for the first letter and the second word, whereas a snake case, everything's lowercase, but you use an underscore to separate them. There's a third case, which is known as a kebab case. No one really uses this, but it's entirely up to you. The default standard in the data science world is essentially to use a snake case. So if we go back to this now, my first name is Sid. Just make sure I got that correct there. And if I now run this, just run this particular cell here, you'll see an error. Now, why is that? It says here the error name error, Sid is not defined. So the reason why we get this error is because Python wants us to assign anything to a variable which is a string within a speech marks. So, and now we can run this, and now it's registered. So you know that it's worked because it's not returned an error. So remember, whenever you enter a string, you need to give it speech marks, do single quotation marks, or double quotation mark, entirely up to you. I like to use double, but you can use single as well. So we're going to run this cell, and then we're going to create a new variable. This time the variable is going to be called greeting, and the value for this is going to be, hey, how are you doing? Okay, so now we're going to combine the two, and to do that, we're going to create a third cell. We're going to add another cell, and this time we're going to concatenate two variables. So we're going to concatenate. Concatenate means to join together. So we're going to join together first name and greeting. But we'll start off with greeting first. So greeting plus first name. And now what we want to do is essentially print. We want to print this so it returns, hey, how are you doing, Sid? And that's what we're looking for. If I run this, it won't work. The reason why is because we haven't run this cell. So let's run this one first. Now let's run this one. And there we go. We've now got our return in the as we wanted. Hey, how are you doing, Sid? But you might have realized we should ideally have a space here. So what I can do here is add a space right here. And I'm just going to run everything, run all cells. And now you can see we've got our space built in to the statement. So, hey, how are you doing, Sid? Has now come out the way we wanted it. So that in essence is how you kind of concatenate values. Now, one thing of note is that you can't actually concatenate strings and integers together. So I'll give an example. So say I want to do another function here. I want to concatenate, let's say greeting, first name, and apples. So let's just change this to age. So what we're going to do now is type in first name, greeting, plus first name, plus age. Now remember, age is defined at the top here. Age is 5. So it should read, what it should read is, hey, how are you doing, Sid 5? But let's see if it works. So if I now go to cell, run all, you'll see we get an error. The reason why is because we cannot concatenate strings and integers. Python doesn't like it. Python prefers you to use strings all the time. So if you concatenate two opposing data types, it will always give you an error. So what you need to do is convert one of them so they'll all match the same. So all three of these could be integers, or all three of these could be strings, but there can't be a mix of either. So what we need to do is change our age variable to a string. So currently it's an integer of 5, and I want to change it. To change it, all we do is we do this string, str short for string. So now when it prints, it'll go greeting plus first name plus age as a string. So now all three variables are a string. If now go cell, run all, we should now get our desired result. So obviously this doesn't make sense. Hey, how are you doing, Sid 5? But just to give you an example of how you'd combine strings, integers, and even floats if you wanted to. So guys, that in a nutshell is just an example of how we can kind of play with different data types. There are a few more. So another very useful point I want to mention is that when it comes to variables, so if I wanted to now add a new cell underneath, if I wanted to print greeting, if I want to see what greeting returns, if I typed in greeting with a capital G and then entered it, it would tell me that greeting is not defined. The reason why is because greeting has to be a lowercase g. So however you defined your variables, you have to ensure you maintain the casings. So here, for instance, greeting is with a lowercase g. I need to ensure that I use the same. So here, greeting will then return the right value that I'm looking for. Another thing you'll see in the world of Python is you'll see a lot of print statements or print functions. So this is known as a function. A function such as print is when you are trying to print or operate on a particular variable. So here you can see I'm printing the word greeting, and I should still get the same result. So if I now do shift and enter, you can see, hey, how are you doing, returns on the screen. So that's another way to quickly print any or run a cell, is to use shift and enter. And you can use print to kind of see a print value of the actual variable. Alternatively, just use the variable name and Jupyter will still recognize it. But if you're in any other IDE, make sure you use the print statement. Okay, so we've covered casing. And then the other thing we want to do is look at how we can comment out code as well. So say if I was to type in, say if I wanted to run all this code, but I didn't want to run this cell, and this cell, you can actually not delete them, but you can block them out. And to block them out, you use the hashtag. So what this does is it comments out your code. Okay, so if I now run all of this, you'll see that these last three cells do not get run entirely at all. And that's because of the commenting out of these lines of code using the hashtag. And equally, you can do the same here. So here, age equals 5, and I can add a comment here. This is just a comment. The cell will run, so age will equal to 5, but this particular section, this comment will not run. So if I now do run all, you'll see that age 5 still returns, and we can check on that because I can just put in a new cell here, type in age, and now if I shift enter, I still get 5, and I don't get the comment that I actually added to this cell. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this first session. I really wanted to keep it basic for now. I'm going to save this file, this Jupyter file, and I'll make it available to you guys in the description to the video. So if you want to download this file just to check my workings, you can do so. Next session, we're going to cover a bit more detail. We'll go into more data types and we'll look at some more advanced data types. And we'll also look at some more advanced features and functions around strings and lists. So stay tuned for the next episode in this series. We're going to get more advanced and we'll start to use more use cases and more examples to help you learn along the way. So guys, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I do hope you've enjoyed this session on an intro to Python for data analysts, and I hope to see you on the next one. Cheers. Take care.